Well, welcome, Sally. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Always Real Talk.
Thanks, happy to be here.
Great. And Kris, it's always a pleasure to see you again.
Oh, it's
Randolph, being the very name. Welcome to Always Real Talk 2020. Let's jump right into it. You know, we can pull it up on the screen. It's the election, the 2020 Democratic delegate count. I mean, what is this count telling us, Kris?
I think that you can definitely see a clear path for Joe Biden in the next month favors him. If you look at the numbers from Super Tuesday, he won with the suburbs, he won with college-educated professionals. And when you go into states like Washington State, when you go into states like Michigan, that's really beneficial for Joe Biden more so than Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was also expected to do well with blue-collar workers. Joe Biden seemed to have snatched that right out of his bucket and put it into his. So Michigan, which Bernie won a couple years ago, is going to look like a do-or-die state for him next week.
So that's what you're thinking, Kris. I mean, look, we've all been around this 1,000 times. We look at these numbers. You know, we know these numbers like the back of our head. I mean, what do you think about this delegate count?
I think this looks really, really good for Joe Biden if you actually know what you're looking at. I think the other day that Bernie actually went down in every single state from 2016. Like he didn't improve on any numbers anywhere. I think that he did improve with like his Latino
9%.
but I'm not sure that I think that might be the only one, if I'm not mistaken. I think a lot of people think that California's not in yet, and that's going to they're going to come from behind, and Bernie's going to be right back where he was before Super Tuesday. I don't think that's going to happen, but even if it does, there's really nowhere to go but down from here. There's really nowhere else where he's going to make a strong standing and be able to pick back up where he was.
Well, I mean, I think the real question becomes, you know, at the end of the day, it's a two-man race. We all know Warren's dropped out, so it's a two-person race, right? And then the question is for the Democrats, what is the path to victory, right? And I don't know. You looked at the numbers. You saw in Sanders in 2016 in Minnesota, he had 60% of the vote. Now he's at 30% of the vote. Right. I mean, look at where he at. In Virginia, he had 35% of the vote, and on Super Tuesday, he had 23% of the vote. So I mean, it's kind of telling you that he is not really. And some people say Warren was in a race, and that's what hurt him because Warren was in a race, right? But at the same time, what is the path to the person who is the Democratic nominee? Who is going to, Kris, win? I know we talked about the African-American vote. I know we talked about the Latino vote. I know we talked about the young vote. But let's get real. This is always real talk. This is about the white woman vote. Is Bernie Sanders going to be able to pull white women who voted for Donald Trump to the Democratic Party?
So far, he has not. And we've seen this in the way Joe Biden has been winning the last couple of days. In states that Joe Biden spent neither a dime or a day, he has beaten Bernie Sanders. And he's beaten them based on women. He's beaten them based on people who have college degrees. These are things that you need to take out of the Republican column. And Bernie Sanders hasn't been delivering on any of this so far. And this has been his spiel.
And this has been his spiel. It's funny because I know, Sally, this is what happens, especially us in the minority community. You'll say, hey, what do you think about the minorities? And sometimes people go to a non-minority and ask them what they think about a minority. Hey, we're talking about white women. Of course, you're a white woman. So let's ask the real. I mean, this is real, right? It's always real talk. We keep it real.
What do you? Spot, Sally, you're speaking for everyone.
I mean, this is, no one's talking about this, but as we know, 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump.
Right.
And the real question is, how are you going to get white women to come back to the Democratic Party? And if that doesn't happen, I don't even know what we're talking about here.
No.
Well, obviously, full stop, the base and the black vote is the most important thing that we have to worry about. And white women are the ones who gave us Trump. But it looks, if you look at the numbers, especially in 2018 and the Doug Jones race, I think a lot of people have realized their mistake. I saw them called last night Whole Foods moms. And sometimes they call them like SJ, social justice, or resistance moms. But resistance moms get out, they raise money, they knock doors, they organize. I mean, look at the gun sense woman, Moms Demand More. I mean, these are all white women who are terrified of Donald Trump. And I think that, like I said, if they weren't paying attention, I think they definitely are now. And I'm optimistic that hopefully they'll come through this time.
Well, I mean, it's a real concern, right? And it's a number of different balances that have to take place. We all know that, right? We know we have to get young people out that voted. They voted in 2008, and it didn't really come out in 2016. How do you energize that base? Clearly, you know, Bernie Sanders did not energize that base so far on Super Tuesday, right? That's what the numbers. I mean, the young folks did not come out in droves for Bernie Sanders. And if you want to be a revolutionist and you want to be out here, you want to say you got all these young people going to vote for you, but yet a lot of young people stayed home.
Well, as someone who's worked with young people, President Young Democrats have been doing young voter outreach. Nothing Bernie Sanders said resonated as a young voter type campaign. Young voter type campaigns, you have to keep a positive message. Young voters tend to like to believe that they are changing their world with their vote. It's a device. Bernie Sanders has a divisive aura to him. He likes picking fights. He likes being part of the establishment. And sometimes just people don't have time for that. They don't want to be part of that movement, what he calls a movement. By contrast, look at President Obama. Who was the last person to really capture the young vote. It was about hope. It was about change. It felt like you were part of something really magnanimous and big. And it was also peer-to-peer. You had your neighbors telling you to vote. You had your community. You had all these community meetups. I have not seen any of that so far in either campaign, either Biden's or Bernie's. And Bernie was the one who had the 5-year advantage of running since April of 2015, and you saw none of it. So the Democrats in general, in order to engage, have to go somewhat to that President Obama playbook, get really grassroots really quickly, and start to build in a sense that this is important to young people.
Now, clearly, you know, young people, and this is interesting, Sally. I have a nephew. My nephew's 29, 30 years old. I have another one that's 26. And so you talk to him about, you know, who you voting for, blah, 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 what's happening. And he goes, you know, his number one thing is my student loan's going to get paid off. Right? That's his thing. Hey, whoever's going, even though he doesn't quite believe that it's going to happen, the fact that someone's talking about it excites him. And he's young, he's about to get married, right? He's about to have a little one, and he's saying the prenatal care is something that's important to him from a healthcare perspective. So he's like, hey, I don't even think any of this is actually going to happen. But the fact that they're talking about it, right? So on the other side, Kris, my mom, you know, over 70 years old, she's, hey, voting Biden straight down the line. Just straight Biden, that's where she is. And I said, so Mom, why Biden? And she said, you know, foreign policy. And she started naming all this stuff that I didn't even think my mom was paying attention.
Right now.
Right? Who's going to address some of that, some of those things? Who's steady? Right? And her other issue was she wanted Trump out. And she believed that Joe Biden would be the one that could take him out. So I think that's where we're going. Are people in love with Joe Biden? I'm not sure. But do they see Joe Biden as the path to victory over Bernie? That's more so, you know, where you go. His win in Virginia, right? I mean, we have to, we're all political people, right? So, look, if you don't win Virginia, you got to win one of the battleground states. You come back to your point, Kris. You mentioned what? Michigan.
Michigan, Minnesota.
Well, Minnesota, I mean, we look what happened in Minnesota.
I mean, what's left? I mean, that's a very good
That's the real, what's left.
Good point. Minnesota was probably his high water mark in the Midwest. Wouldn't you think? I mean, it's a 6% black population, and you know I think he cleaned up there last time. So for him to do so poorly that time, and now I've heard them say, "Oh, that's all because of Amy." Well, that's kind of the point. I mean, the fact that he was able to get Amy's support is how you win a state. So that doesn't make it not count. It kind of makes it count more. And to try to, I saw something on Twitter last night with somebody trying to extrapolate that data and apply it to like Michigan and Wisconsin. And they were saying, oh, well, he only won the black vote by like 4%. Only lost the black vote by 4%. And I was like, but it's only 6% of the state. So if you're actually just trying to make that scale to like Michigan, that's not the same. That's not helpful.
Totally different.
No, Michigan's over 10% of black voters.
Right, and he did really well with people of color who aren't black. I don't know what the demographic is for that, but that is a specific demographic specific to Minnesota, and Ilhan Omar is wildly popular in Minnesota, and that's not something that's gonna take place anywhere else.
It's going to take place anywhere else. Now let's go back to. I always had my prediction in the first show. You know, we kind of talked about with what we thought things were, but if you don't win, Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, then why are we having this conversation, right?
Right.
I mean, I know it's good. People like it. People get to come on TV. They get to talk about it. But at the end of the day, Kris, Biden just proved that he could win Virginia and win Virginia big, which
without
is a very
so
important.
much as spending that much money. That is
I don't know if he was there.
He went there one time.
I mean, he went there one time.
For me, one office.
One office, one time.
Right.
Okay, then let's go on to Ohio. Sally, what do you think?
I mean, I'm sure he thinks that he's got a really good chance because he has this image of, this lunch bucket.
Sally, is he going to win Ohio?
No,
what
he's
is
not
your
going to win
prediction?
Ohio.
Bernie, no, it's going to win.
Bernie's not going to win Ohio.
Okay,
Oh.
so
He didn't win Ohio. He thought he could win it 4 years ago.
But the question is, who's going to win Ohio?
Biden. Joe
Biden.
Biden.
So, Biden?
I read the exits 4 years ago in Ohio. It was almost as if it was saying, Bernie, you're crazy. What are you talking about? We understand we are angry at corporate America, but we also get our jobs from there.
Right.
So how are you challenging this notion of private business, private equity, private interests, when most of Americans go to work at some place that's not public but private?
Okay, and I got it. My prediction. Here we go. We're in Ohio. We're in Michigan. That's the case. That's the battle. This area is going to be. Did people forget that Obama and Biden bailed out the automotive industry?
No.
I mean, I just want to know that. Do we forget that happened? Do you think that the people there in Michigan who rely on the automobile industry, who are all going to be losing all of their jobs, and Biden and Obama came through and bailed them out?
But there was.
You think people are going to forget that?
Bernie seems to think he can run against NAFTA and somehow tie that to Biden somehow, as if that's,
But Bernie has been very interesting in the way he runs ads, where he kind of confused the no position for a yes. Right now he's running ads in Florida, he's running ads in Illinois, where you would swear he was President Obama's best friend. And he tried to primary President Obama in 2012. He has said very questionable things about President Obama even since 2016. But you see these ads that you would almost swear that President Obama has endorsed Bernie Sanders. And he did the same thing in 2016 with the auto bailout. He voted clearly no against the auto bailout in various iterations of it. And then, but when he was challenged on it, he was like, well, no, that wasn't my position. It was specifically for specific point amendment and whatnot. And for the time, it was able to work in Michigan. It muddied the water on whether he supported the auto bailout or not. Now, he can't do that twice. He did it to Secretary Clinton in 2016. Now, obviously, everyone has that playbook. Everybody knows what Bernie Sanders will do. He's a known entity. He's been running for 5 years now. If you weren't put on notice, you're a complete idiot. So I'm sure the Biden campaign has the playbook. I'm sure the Biden campaign has a response.
Let's take a look at this ad from Bernie Sanders. Let's take a look at it.
Somebody who has the virtue of saying exactly what he believes, great authenticity, great passion, and is fearless. Bernie served on the Veterans Committee and got bills done. I think people are ready for a call to action. They want honest leadership who cares about them. They want somebody who's going to fight for them. And they will find it in Bernie. That's right, feel the burn.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Of wrapping himself in Barack Obama's almost sort of it sort of makes it sound like an endorsement almost.
Another Obama ad. Joy, I find this so interesting. In 2012, it was Senator Sanders who noted that Obama had actually been a disappointment. President Obama had been a disappointment. He hadn't gone far enough on a number of issues and topics, and said that, it wouldn't be too bad if he had a primary opponent. So I find it very interesting now in this race, when the polls have tightened, after a number of voters in this country have had their say, namely African-American voters, Democrats, with whom President Obama is extremely popular. Now we have another individual trying to wrap themselves in the cloak of President Obama, if you will. I think what we've seen in recent history, Joy, is that ads, no matter how many ads you run, no matter how much money you spend on ads, they cannot erase the facts and history.
Sally, what are your thoughts on this?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, if he was going to do something like this, why did he wait until after Super Tuesday?
Good point.
I don't know, like, obviously they didn't just cut it overnight, so it's been sitting there, and they just decided they didn't need it, and now they think that somehow it's going to have an effect. Second of all, I don't think anybody's buying it, or anybody that they think they're targeting with this is buying it. That colonnade walk was when Obama asked him to get out of the race in 2016, and he said no.
Well, it's interesting.
So.
I mean, that's interesting. Now, you know, Kris, what are your thoughts here? Because
I think they thought they were going to do better with Latino voters, and the numbers haven't come back as great. He's doing much better than 2016. In fact, 2016, Secretary Clinton kind of ran the board with every demographic that looks like America and looks like the Democratic Party. They've done better. I think Washington Post has it at 9%. Bernie Sanders won 9% more than Joe Biden in the Latino vote, but that's not a runaway. And if you're not winning as highly with African Americans, where they thought they were going to do better there, and it hasn't been so the case. Joe Biden isn't doing Secretary Clinton's numbers. He's not doing President Obama's numbers, but he's pretty much near there. In Alabama, I think it was almost near 72%.
It's a lot.
Well,
it was high.
well, but to be fair, I mean, this all started, and I think people thought that I don't think people thought this was possible until Bloomberg ran his ad. And, you know, let's take a look at that.
Great president and an effective mayor. Leadership that makes a difference.
He's been a leader throughout the country for the past 12 years. Mr. Michael Bloomberg is here.
Well, Bloomberg started off running this ad, and people, you know, my mother called me and said, hey, Obama endorsed Bloomberg, right? And then after that, and to be fair, Joe Biden's got an ad out now. Let's take a look at Joe's ad.
Joe Biden, you were the first decision I made, and it was the best.
It was a relationship forged in fire. Barack Obama and Joe Biden inherited a world in crisis. And together they passed the biggest economic recovery package in the history of the nation, rescued the automobile industry, made a record investment in clean energy, and passed the historic Affordable Care Act. Now we're facing a different crisis.
Replace us!
And no one is more ready to lead America than Joe Biden. Strong, steady, stable, a statesman the world knows and trusts. A powerful voice for the middle class. A man of character and decency our kids can look up to. President Obama called him, quote, the best vice president America has ever had. The president we need now. Biden, president.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
As you can see, Joe has an ad too, and I think Bloomberg started this. And it was something you didn't see in past campaigns where, you know, people would throw people in, but technology and people are being very clever. Like you said, I don't think the Bernie Sanders ad was Obama saying everything at one time. It was clipped in. No. But like I mentioned, Grandma Stan, oh man, Obama's now supporting Bernie Sanders. Is that misleading? Do you think these ads are misleading?
I think it's absolutely misleading, but I also don't think that black people are falling for it. I think that a lot of Bernie supporters are thinking black people are falling for it, and that's why they think it's such a great ad. But I don't think that's the kind of thing that resonates.
Okay.
We've seen this in one iteration or the other. We've seen it in the 60s. It was clipped together flyers. In the 70s, it was posters put in our neighborhoods. This is just a modern day version of the misleading okey doke. And African Americans are so used to being on guard from this kind of misleading attack ad in some ways, and misleading ad in general, that I think the wall is going to hit. It's going to smack up against these voters that are used to getting false information. Now, some are going to fall for it, and some falls for the Russian thing, but one of the most resistant communities was African American women to these.
Well, I mean, and you know, what we see here is that at the end of the day, there has to be a push to victory for Democrats. Right. Because I believe that as Trump is now, you know, targeting Bernie, now he's like, okay, Bernie, they're going to throw you out, and he's targeting Biden. I mean, to me, and what we see and some of the pundits are talking about is that we still haven't crossed the threshold to take President Trump out yet.
And you know
right?
why President Trump is doing that, right?
I mean, I know why he's doing it, but you know, he's doing it because he wants to win.
Yeah,
you know,
and,
Bernie.
And they wanted protest voters. We had a lot of numbers of protest voters that we didn't see in 2016. The media gave this false impression that Hillary Clinton had this locked. So people felt more comfortable to sit up. People felt more comfortable to, well, let me send my message more to the DNC than to Donald Trump.
Kris.
Yeah?
She inspired those that are all around, but it's a lot of people, and this is always real talk. They sat at home not because they thought she was going to win. They wasn't inspired. And until the Democratic Party wraps their hand around that and stop acting like people were in love with Hillary Clinton, they wasn't, right? And we go down that road with Joe Biden, we're going to have the same thing.
A lot and spoiled a lot of people. Who inspired you before that? Who inspired you in 2004? Who inspired you in 2008? A lot of voters are routine, run-of-the-mill. This is what I do before I pay my taxes. This is what I do before I go to the post office. A lot of people look for inspiration in their community. And President Obama was a once-in-a-lifetime benchmark, and to compare everybody since then is going to be a great letdown.
I didn't say, well the question wasn't about inspire. I mean, it's always real talk. People going to tweet. People going to be mad at what I say. You know, black people came out. It was the first black president that actually inspired them. And a lot of people just came out because he was the first black president. And he met all the qualifications. And so people I know who haven't voted since, and they voted the first time and didn't vote the second time, right? But because they said, I want to be part of history, and this was a way for them to be a part of history, so they never had to tell their grandkids that they was on the wrong side of history.
And that's amazing.
Okay, so we got that. Now we get down to 2000, and I say this because I think the Democratic Party, if in fact they just believe that, you know, they'll correct the mistakes of the past, then you'll have exactly what happened again. Right? And right now, people just assume that people didn't come out to vote because they thought Hillary Clinton had it. And that's just not the case. Some people, I talk to people every day down the street, they just tell me, look, they didn't want to vote for anyone, so they didn't. They wasn't inspired by Hillary Clinton, and they said they didn't like Donald Trump, so they stayed home. Now, the question is, if that happens again, that is a problem.
That is a problem. But I think there's two things at work here. March 2016 for Hillary Clinton, her favorability was 64%. By this is March 2015, I'm sorry. By next following year, her favorability had run down to 47%. She was starting to run underwater.
Because of Bernie.
Because of all the attack ads, and mostly Bernie. There was a couple of different things in the work. So it's I think we've learned some of those lessons. I think that's one of the reasons you saw a huge coalescing. I didn't think that was going to happen. I was really worried for Vice President Biden. But Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, suspending their campaign, understanding what's at stake, and coming behind Biden right away was one of those lessons learned, that we need to show a united front. We need to come together. Biden isn't anyone's great prize. He's not President Obama. He doesn't stand in front and speak in poetry and pose. But he is one of our best chances to get rid of one of the most consequential and perniciously dangerous presidents that we've ever had in many different ways besides just policy.
Well, I think they got work to do. I think Democratic
Party,
they
have work to do.
And as someone who's worked in the Clinton administration, was on and worked in Clinton 92, 96, Gore 2000, was Obama delegate. I see this all, right? And I see this train, and I'm always trying to make sure that people are in front of this train, because I think that President Trump could be on his way to victory if within the next 60 days the Democratic Party doesn't figure out how to get itself together, right?
We would be stupid to think otherwise.
People are trying to win the nomination, so they're going to win the fight and lose the war, right?
Yep.
And I'm like,
the argument.
They win the argument and win the war. So the real question becomes, and we've seen it. Everyone's got behind Biden. Everyone's seems to be. I know people, Bernie Sanders people. There are a lot of them out there. They're vocal, but let's be clear. I mean, Bakari Sellers was on the show, and we talked, and like Bakari Sellers said, he said, look, people forget that Hillary beat Bernie by 3 million votes. I mean, it wasn't even close.
3.7.
Right? Yeah, it was 3.7 million. He beat it by, so it wasn't even close. And right now, if you look at what's taking place, Joe Biden beat him all over the place, right? So
yeah, with no money, that's amazing. That's still
and not there. Like imagine, can you imagine? I mean, we've all been involved in political campaigns. Imagine if you didn't have to be in the state, you didn't have to have no office, you had no personnel, and your candidate never showed up, and you still beat someone that spent millions of dollars.
Room, we're like, wait a minute, we won what?
I don't think they spent a dime in Massachusetts. He didn't have an office. He didn't want an ad.
Not
I don't think
Maine.
he went there.
No, I mean, actually, Bernie had people on the ground in Maine.
And that's Warren's home state.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so that shows a lot.
Well, so here's what I'm going to say. Let's go back to Obama and let's go back to how are we going to beat Trump, because that kind of goes.
That's where I want to go. That's what we're talking
about.
What is the
path? All the
path?
endorsements came together. That didn't just happen organically. I have a lot of respect for Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar for what they did. But that was Barack Obama with his pen and his phone sending the cavalry to Texas. And if you didn't know that before Susan Rice endorsed, you did as soon as that happened.
Right.
And there's a lot more where that is coming from. That was an endorsement without an endorsement. I think a lot of people understood that. A lot of times these, when a narrative always emerges about us versus them. In 2012, particularly when they chose Paul Ryan as a running mate, I was like, we get to run against the Ryan budget, and that ended up shaping the entire campaign, and that ended up how we beat them so handily. Like that just made me so happy. They thought that it was such a great pick. It was a great pick. But I think what's happening now, nobody. Because he doesn't inspire people, but nobody dislikes Joe Biden.
Right, he's not.
He's a good guy. He's like had these ups and downs. He's got such an inspirational story, and it's going to come down to: do you want Donald Trump or this truly decent man who wants what's best for America? And I think that's going to how the race is going to take shape. And I think that's going to be an easy way to beat Donald Trump if we can make that work.
So
the
Kris,
way his
let me ask you a
rivals
question,
ran
Kris.
to him, I want to just say that the way his rivals ran to him, because he always treated them with respect. There was no moment where he took the gloves off or tried to bloody anyone up. That is something that Americans are yearning for, especially after 4 years of Donald Trump. And he's running a general election campaign in the primary, and that is a very smart strategy.
Okay, well, I mean, clearly you guys are just in love with Joe Biden. We got Joe Biden lovers in our studio. But let's back up, because while I have a tremendous amount of respect for Joe, I think he's just this nice guy. He comes across like he doesn't have like a bad bone in his body. He's trying to figure it out. But we also know that we've seen the video. If Joe talks a long time, it's very problematic. And how do you think the campaign's going to be able to handle his ability to not make those mistakes that he makes? I'm watching TV and he says I'm running for Senate, and I'm like, oh my God. He says some things, and I like Joe, right?
You mean that 3 70-year-old men don't say problematic things from time to time? I thought about that today because.
But it's very clearly that it's a difference between a bunch of people in the race and clearly Trump says a lot of stuff, but people are so used to Trump saying whatever Trump's saying, it doesn't even stick anymore, right?
It's baked into both of them, I think.
But now it's being exposed, right? It's being exposed more so on Joe Biden. Not saying that he can't win, but this is always real talk. This is a problem that the campaign's going to have to figure out how to deal with, and how people are going to have to figure out a message of stuff. The Joe Biden that came out and for his victory speech on Super Tuesday was the Joe. That's the Joe that everyone loved, right? And he kind of said some crazy stuff, but that's Joe, right?
And you got it right there. Joe has some highs, some significantly great warm moments. He has amazing speeches. He has amazing times when he wins the debates. The other two candidates in the race, I have yet to see them even meet that benchmark. And it might be a case of, being the tallest man in the room amongst midgets.
Are you talking about the debates?
About either the debates. He won the last debate. Are you going to say?
Did you watch all of the? You watched all the debates, right?
No, not all of the debates.
Okay, I was going to say, because I don't think he won all the debates.
No, I wouldn't know. I would never say he won all the debates.
I don't know if debates is going to be his strong point.
But no, I'm saying it's almost like you're asking to be the tallest man in a room full of very short men. I won't use any words. Joe has his moments, and those moments are spectacular. They're presidential. They're at the highs. If we're talking about Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, I have yet to see moments where they have displayed magnanimous gratitude and showed those 1,000 points of lights moments. And so if the competition would have been maybe a Kamala Harris or Warren, maybe then we have a conversation. We may be changing. If you're Team Joe, you may be changing to just to those two. He may not be the greatest at staying on focus, but in this room, in this competition that he's going into, I think he's better than the other two.
Okay, well, and the good thing about it is time will tell.
Yeah.
Right? Time will definitely tell. When now, let's move towards the next hurdle, right? Because I mean, my sense, you mentioned earlier that you know, Obama's probably making phone calls. Susan Rice endorsed. You know, I think it's all a turn. At the end of the day, Clyburn delivered. Congressman Clyburn is a political genius. And all 22 Democratic nominees who were there, they know it. In 2004, he picked John Kerry, and he became the nominee. In 2008, he picked Barack Obama, and he became the Democratic nominee. In 2016, he endorsed Hillary Clinton, and she became the Democratic nominee. We all know that President Obama became the president, and Kerry and Clinton became Secretary of State. Clyburn is 3-0 for picking Democratic nominees, so there's no wonder that 22 people running for the Democratic nomination were president and all wearing those blue Clyburn shirts. So this weekend again, it proved that Congressman Clyburn is still the man in this country, and more so when it comes to South Carolina.
Yes.
And when Clyburn delivered, everyone else got on board. And I'm going to say Clyburn delivered, which he did.
Oh, absolutely.
But let me say,
that changed everything.
African-American older women stood up and said, I'm looking what everyone's saying, and I'm still going with Joe. And when they sent that signal, then everyone, I mean, it was almost like when Obama won South Carolina, then that's when people of color said, that's when people of color also said, oh, he can win.
Right.
And they came out and supported him because they said, you know, we went to the polls and they voted for him and they showed, all right, we can win the country. Is this that type of moment?
The same thing happened, I think, in reverse. Is that everybody was waiting to see what black people were going to do in South Carolina. And when it was so definitive, then everybody said, oh, okay, so this is what we're doing now. So not only did he sweep the black vote, a lot of white people stepped up and did that too. Absolutely. They said that like something like Democratic participation was half what the Republicans was on Sunday because as they mail it all in.
Right.
Everybody was waiting to see what happened in South Carolina. And I've been saying, you know, ever since 2008, South Carolina decides. And anybody who doesn't understand that South Carolina decides doesn't understand Democratic politics.
Well, yeah, they decided then, but then you turned around in Texas. You know, I mean, Biden did very well in Texas.
That's what I'm saying.
And then he did well in California. I mean, for the late vote, where people were saying, "Oh, let me see what I'm going to do," and I made the decision.
Right.
So let's just assume. Let's assume this is a Biden-Trump race. I know I'll get Bernie folks in the studio, and they'll give me their opinion.
And by the way, wait, I want to say one really strong point, and Sally is really saying it. And this is something that Sally has said, and I have said, and even you have said. Where is your black staffing before the day you run for president? Where are the people who are working in your campaigns? Where are the people who are working in your offices? The reason the path was limited for Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg is because they didn't have a ingrained community knowledge of the black community before they decided to run. They could have been amazing people, but you cannot ask the African American community for their vote the day you decide to run for office, the week you decide, even the year you decide. You have to build that relationship going in. And so for everybody who's out there planning on running in 2024, 2028, who's in your office? Who's working there? Who do you have on staff right now, and who are you building those relationships with right now? I
mean, actually, that's a great point, and it always comes back to Amy wouldn't even meet with Roland Martin. I mean, it took, you know, she wouldn't even meet with the black press. So I was thinking about how you going to win and talk to black people, and when you talk to black press, shout out to Roland Martin for, you know, jumping on board and holding people accountable to make sure the black press has a woman to seat at the table.
I will say they were Amy and I've kind of tried to stay like not having a first choice, but Amy and Pete were in my top ones. But I'm not going to defend their outreach to the black community because they've both done a terrible job. I don't want to say a terrible job; they haven't done it. But I'd like to think that after this, they have both seen that you can't run a Democratic campaign the way that they did. And they have 4 years now. They're both young. They both have a bright future. They can live to fight another day. They have 4 years to not do what Bernie Sanders did and actually change things and build that relationship. And then be a much stronger candidate when they have the opportunity.
Well, I will say this, even from a communication perspective, we started off about a year ago at Always Real Talk, and, you know, you know, Bernie Sanders' communications director, Simone, you know Simone very well. She came by. She talked to me. Former Bernie.
She's with Biden.
I know, but former Bernie. Now
There's
with
a
Biden.
reason she's not with Bernie anymore.
What's the reason? You guys are really beat up Bernie today. I mean, you guys are really jumping on him. But but my point is that she came by. She came by here. We talked. We had a great conversation. We didn't, you know, jump on camera, but she came by. She heard some great things we're doing. She came by. She wanted to see what we're doing, and but it was that type of small touching of different folks that's needed in a campaign in order to win. I'm moving past, you know. I want to talk about who can beat Donald Trump. You say Biden, so we're there. We don't want to go talk about Bernie. We'll stick with Biden. Now let's end on this Biden Trump matchup.
Okay.
Right? Because that's what people are, you know, that's what people are talking about.
Yeah.
You know, how does Biden beat Trump in Ohio?
He starts today. Yeah. That's what he needs to do. We still have a primary.
Today's kind of late, isn't it?
Well, we got to go forward.
It's in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. I mean, so is Biden going to beat? Is Biden going to beat Bernie in Ohio?
Yes. Yes, he is. But we need, the one thing I said that I regretted in 2016, and I even said it in February of 2016, is that we needed a long period between the primary and the general. We turn around from July and expect to run the same level and same intensity that we ran for 2 years. Our primaries are getting longer. We need to, in fact, if the Democratic Party is listening now, they need to consider figuring out a way to shorten the primaries. So right now, as it would be important for us to start our organizational build-up right now. That includes our legal defense. That includes our strategic mobilization. That includes voter registration. That includes even testing these systems. It took 5 hours for people to vote in Texas, 7 hours in California. This is ridiculous. And one of those is a blue state. So we have to, as Democrats, understand when our people can vote, we can win. We have to address that right away.
You shouldn't have to, what I saw is you shouldn't be extraordinary. You shouldn't have to be the guy who waits 7 hours to vote.
Oh yeah, right. And I'm just trying to, once again, you have a lot of young folks not gonna wait out there for 7 hours. They're wait there for 5 hours. Some people get off work and they're trying to get to the polls, and they want to be voted. Yeah, they like, hey, I'm kind of out of here. But I mean, I want to still go back to, you know, the economy's doing great. I want to go back to the unemployment numbers are low. I want to go back to, you know, things aren't, you know, bad economically.
No.
In this country.
But the stock market rallied yesterday when the Super Tuesday numbers came out.
Well, I mean, it's also, I mean, you know, depending on how you spin it, right? Because some people say, oh, they did it because, you know, it looks like Joe's going to win. They figured out the stock market went up, right? Then some people are going to say, no, they got their hands around the coronavirus.
Have we?
And, well, this is about money, though, too, Kris, right? Everyone's sold. What's the best time to buy? When things are low. So, of course, people are going to dump money in the market because now they see all these good buys. So, you know, if you're on the Republican side, you say one thing. On the Democratic side, you say one thing. Everyone says whatever, right? But at the end of the day, why are people going to go vote for Joe Biden and not Donald Trump? And the reason why I'm asking that question because there are a lot of people in the studio, and they gave me all these reasons that, you know, Donald's a sexist, Donald's a racist, the president's a racist, and people are tired of how he acts, they're tired of how he tweets, and we got to get him out there. So that tells me that you believe that some of the Democrats believe that Biden or Bernie is going to win based on morality. Can you win the presidency based on morality?
Let me give you a pocketbook reason.
I'll get back to my question. I'll get off my question. Can the Democratic nominee win the presidency on morality?
I think he'll give you a differential. I don't think it's going to win the day. But let me give you a pocketbook reason. A couple, 2 years ago, there were a bunch of farmers in the Midwest. Couldn't get their crops to market, couldn't get the workers that they needed. Some of them, committing suicide. Some of them were at economic anxiety. They had to do a bailout for those folks. Now, President Trump hasn't been as volatile since those early days in his office, but that nervousness about what he can do is still there. What he can't, one day he'll tweet, I hate Apple stock, and then Apple stock, if you work at Apple, will be going down. The number one company in the United States, the number one employer, will just rally to the floor because of his erratic behavior. I think at this moment, he is, what is he, at 50% likability?
First of all, his likability is up. The economy, I hear what you're saying.
Yep.
Oh, the economy's up. Like, people are making more money.
Steady.
But it's
steady.
It's
Those 401ks are doing well.
It's a 401ks. I mean, you talk to the average person, they're doing better. They're not suffering financially.
Steady,
and there's people in certain communities
isn't.
that still haven't felt what they should feel in terms of being a part of the economy.
Exactly.
But factually, the economy is steady and going up. Factually, his approval numbers have went up. Factually, unemployment is at an all-time low in African American community, Hispanic community, and Asian community.
Oh no,
those are all factual numbers, right? So, given that that's facts, you know, what's on the table outside of I hate Trump?
No, that is not the appeal, and I don't discount that. In fact, I look at that when I looked at who's from the Democratic side is putting up as a nominee. I think Trump's erraticness is what is really working against him, and you saw
that goes back to morality then. Because some people, I mean, to really say he's not a moral person, he acts this way, he says this stuff.
In a sense of trust.
Right,
yes.
right. So you believe that, you know, Americans are going to go and vote morality over their pocketbooks.
No, but it ties into their pocketbook. If he one day decides to say, I'm closing all our borders, that affects your money.
But that's
that
an
affects
assumption.
what you pay. But we've seen him do that.
Over the last 4 years, and I'm only playing devil advocate. Over the last 4 years, we started off saying that this was going to happen when he won. None of that has happened.
Well, the trade war happened.
I mean, but some people say, well, okay, let's go back.
And it really did affect.
Let's go back up to Michigan. I mean, some of these trade wars with China is going to definitely benefit some American factories out here. So, I mean, is that the argument that the Democrats want to go into?
The trade wars with China actually put a lot of people out of business. There's actually a lot of people at home because of some of the things that President Trump has done.
Is the economy up?
The economy is up.
Okay.
Or steady. But the economy began being steady.
Is unemployment down?
The economy is steady.
Is unemployment down?
It's steadily down, yes.
Okay, so what do you...
But hold on, this trajectory started under President Obama.
But see, you keep going, I mean, but you and I know, and I agree.
Not a winning argument.
It's not a winning argument. I'm just trying to figure out...
Right.
Talk to me, Sally.
I think she and I are on the same page with this. But what I want to say is, things might be doing well, but is there any reason to think that they wouldn't be do as well with Biden as president? I mean, I think that if you might worry about Elizabeth Warren being president and messing up with the economy, but I don't think anybody thinks Joe Biden is going to come in there and do something drastic that's going to change that situation for everybody.
So is your point that Biden will keep things steady?
Yeah, a return to normalcy. You asked what the message was? A return to normalcy. That's what I'm seeing from everybody. Like, people just want to right the ship and put America back the way it was. Nobody wants these big swing, I don't think, people don't want to take a risk right now. They want somebody that they can trust, that they can look to, that's going to, give them comfort. I don't think we can overstate how this coronavirus is such a wild card.
It is.
It may not be bad, but this has the potential to be like something we've never seen. And Trump is definitely, I don't think anybody, just because it might be okay, doesn't mean that he's someone that you trust to make sure that it's okay.
Well, hold on. Well, let's step back though, Sally. Let's step back because I got to be here to represent both sides here, and there are people that saying that he didn't act fast enough, but he acted faster than Obama.
Take off my strategist hat and put on my government hat. I was in the Department of Health at the time, the department that we worked on the Ebola crisis. President Obama worked on that immediately. The coordination between global all the way down to the community was almost instantaneous. It was immediate. The issue, containment.
Let me ask you a question though. How long did it take for Obama? Because this is what people are saying, and I want you to address it. They're saying that it took Obama how long before he declared an emergency crisis?
I don't think that's how pandemics work.
I'm saying, but
that's not how pandemics work.
I agree with you, but right now, what the candidates are saying is that the President Trump did not act fast, say emergency fast enough. He said something about a hoax, and he didn't take it serious, and he didn't act fast enough. He acted in I think 3 weeks.
Let's reframe.
And called it America. I'm
let's
saying
use,
this was out there. So
let's use health and terminology. So it's based on epidemiology. It's based on whether the virus has an ability to communicate, to spread. When the health system said that it was a time to declare it an emergency, President Obama declared it an emergency. What we're seeing in some cases here from President Trump is that he is lagging behind what our health systems would have recommended. There you still see these visuals where he's on communication with his own people and they have to stop him and bring him back to what the proper talking points are, what the proper realities are about how the virus spreads, how it can be communicated. It's taking him a little longer, and there is no left response or right response. It's just a presidential response, and you're not seeing him get the gravity of it even up to yesterday.
So we're saying that you're saying that his response is what?
His response is to still push it off, to still worry about the political impact. There is no such thing in this moment. We are all Americans. We're all part of the global community. And to get ready, to get a pandemic response plan in place where from the top levels of government understand what's happening at the community health center when you present should have already been communicated. And I wish nothing but the best. He's my president in this moment. He's my president at this point. But I'm listening to him and I'm not hearing the things where people can feel assured. And this has nothing to do with left or right. I'm listening to him and he still doesn't even understand that someone doesn't go to work the next day after you believe that you have this virus. And that makes me nervous in a way that I have not been nervous since 2016.
Yes, he's definitely recommending that people go back to work, and he disputed the World Health Organization's numbers. He just straight up said, I don't believe that number. He tweeted it, and I think he also said it on TV, and that's just not something that
any president.
That's not an appropriate way to handle.
Well, I mean, he doesn't believe in global warming either. So I mean, which is going back to the point was how does a Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in a very simple way that grandma and auntie and uncle can just clearly get it. Now, some people want Trump gone, and they're going to vote. They would vote for Mickey Mouse. If Mickey Mouse was on the ballot versus Donald Trump, they would vote Mickey Mouse. We got that, right? Then, so the fight is not for the left, right? The fight is for the independent. Right. The fight is for the conservatives that want to see something different based on what they're experiencing. The fight is for to energize some of the folks that are liberals, but still get them to come vote, right?
The Obama-Trump voters, is that
the Obama-Trump?
The 5 million or so who voted for him.
So there you go. How does Vice President Biden do that through messaging from a communication perspective?
Well, I think in 2016, there was all this, both parties are the same, and Trump was kind of a TV star, and everybody thought, he'll once he's in office, he'll moderate and he'll be a normal president. So this was all theoretical. It was foreseeable, but this was all theoretical in 2016. And now we've had 4 years of seeing exactly how this plays out with him in charge. So I don't think it's going to be as hard to say, hey, is this what we really want? And like I said, Biden's strength and his dignity is just such a striking contrast to that, and be like, I can put things back and get the country going back in the right direction. I think that's going to be the message that we put out there. And I think this time we have receipts on the ways that Trump, like I said, it was theoretical before, but now we can point to all the things that he's done that are not what we want for this country.
I have to give credit to Sally because she said this a million times and not learned the wrong message. And it was clear if you read 2016 exits, the perceivable moderate in that race was perceived to be Donald Trump. 2016, it was all there in the work in Ohio, in other swing states. He was perceived to be the moderate, steady hand against a more radical, more leftist Hillary Clinton. He can't say that in 2020. And Joe Biden has walked a very, very even keel line. He's not the perfect man for the moment, but he's the right man for the moment. And he comes off as someone who's been there, who's known the job, who was with President Obama when he did some of the great President Obama things. He's going to be able to at least do one thing for the American people, be a steady hand in times of crisis.
But do you think that's enough? Do you think a steady hand in times of crisis?
You said what's a good message?
Well,
hold on, you said what's a good message?
It has to be a winning message, right? Yeah. Do you think that's a winning message?
I think it's a good message.
Will Democrats who voted for...
I don't think that's enough.
Okay, will Democrats who voted for Donald Trump now vote for Joe Biden?
I think in 2018, I think
that's the question, right?
2018, that there is some deep regret, particularly in this suburban, what is it, Whole Foods moms demographic, that they are trying to make up for it.
So you believe people are going to vote? And I didn't mean to cut you off, but you believe people are going to vote against their pocketbook?
I don't think it's. I don't see that argument at all.
I don't see that as a vote. Their pocketbook's doing well right now.
Right.
Yeah, but we haven't put that on the table. We're saying we're going to keep the ship steady with good policies that are inclusive. So you're not.
Well, that's what you're saying, but when it comes to them debating, it's going to be some real. They got to have some difference. If you're saying everyone's the same, then how are you?
If 2018, if people didn't believe that there should have been change, there wouldn't have been as much change as we saw, and we saw it around the country in sweeping numbers. So people are happy with certain things about the economy and certain things, and I even know it's not winning, but I want to point that came from President Obama. What we need to keep steady is a steady economy, but we're also going to be the steady hand in the storm. We're going to be the decency that you haven't been able to see. Every time President Trump goes overseas and represents America, his numbers falter here and there. Americans are not necessarily happy with the representation, and we as Americans feel like we're number one.
Kris, his approval ratings have went up.
Went up in these last couple of days.
No, it's went up in the last 30 days. Last 30, 60 days. We have the numbers.
That's true. And
his numbers went up. He was in the tank, and now his numbers are 50%. So if his approval numbers are going up at a time when we were saying, hey, we need to get rid of someone who some people think he's doing better. I think the message can't be the steady hand, because people are now like what he's doing. Whatever he's done over the last 60 days, people like it.
Well, I think people are, the sense that I'm getting is people are like, oh, great, but I don't think anyone's thinking that he's doing it. They're like, oh, yay, things aren't terrible today. I don't think that anybody trusts that these are happening because Trump is making good policy or making good decisions, and that's why the economy is doing well. I think that's just what's happening. I don't think a Biden has policies that are perceived as going to wreck the economy like some other Democrats who are running. So I just don't see, my 401k is not going to do well under Joe Biden. I don't see how that's going to resonate. And I don't see any pockets of Hillary voters who are then going to turn around and now vote for Trump. So they might stay home, but I can't imagine. I think they would turn out. There'd be more turnout, especially in the black community, for Joe Biden than there was for Hillary Clinton. If only just because we've gotten a handle on some of the voter suppression since 2016. So I think that I don't see a lot of movement from Democrat to Republican. I think it's all moving our way. Now, I don't have specific numbers on that, but I just can't imagine who is so disillusioned with the Democratic Party that they're now going to vote for Trump. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, I'm just saying right now, his approval numbers are going up. Right? His approval numbers are going up. So whatever we say, people don't like this, they don't like that, somehow some people like something because the numbers are going up, right?
Everybody likes money in their pocket.
Everybody likes money in their pocket. We got to and I have to, represent all these different issues because,
I agree.
Bernie, we'll have Bernie folks on. They can come on. They can give their whatever they have to say. We invite them on the show. Come talk about what they want to talk about.
And by the way, no one.
But I think that Joe still got some hurdles to overcome, right? The vice president has a bunch of hurdles to overcome. He has to overcome the banking industry because, right now what Bernie is going to do, and we saw it earlier today, he started talking about it. He said there's some explanations that Joe's going to have to answer, some questions that he's going to have to answer. He said it, I think, on his conference they laid out. The banking industry is one. His stands on the wars too. He came up with like 4 or 5 different things that people really care about, and he said Joe's gonna have to answer that question.
And you
and I know Joe has the ability to answer the question, and Joe has the ability to mess up the question. So the question is, what Joe is going to show up to answer that question, and that is going to really start to define how we get there. We know he has the ability to answer the question correctly. We've also seen him take a simple question and tear it up. And I think that's what the Bernie campaign is wants to expose. Which former vice president are you getting?
and I put my bets on Joe.
It's a question of discipline. Yeah. I think Biden has gotten better, or maybe he's just gotten to where somebody's gotten his attention. He's a completely different candidate in the last 10 days than he has been before. Bernie Sanders isn't particularly disciplined either, so I don't know that he does just as bad. So this is a really good point, but I want to go back to all this just involves vetting. Let's talk about Biden's past positions. Let's talk about mistakes he's made in the past. Yep. That's all baked in. This "We Know Joe" is the hashtag, and I think that's kind of brilliant. He might make a gaffe, he might stumble, he might say the wrong thing, he might do something that embarrasses you when it's your uncle. But people know him, and they go, "Oh, that's Joe. He doesn't really mean it," And I think that, like I said, it's baked into his candidacy in a way that Bernie Sanders still has a lot of skeletons in his closet that hasn't come out, and they're trying to do the same thing to Biden. There's nothing out there people don't know about Joe Biden.
Right, but I mean, I'll just say that is one of my Republican friends who came on the show, and he said, "Yeah, everyone knows Joe. It's just something Joe's going to do. He doesn't mean it. He just kind of says it, right? Right, Kris? But they're going to say, hey." President Trump, he doesn't mean it. That's just what he says. He just says some things sometimes. So we're gonna have two people running for president that just says two or three or whoever's running. Well, I'm talking about two people running. It'll be a Democrat, it'll be a Republican running, and both of our candidates that we possibly can choose just say things because that's just who they are and they really don't mean it. That's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting how it plays out, who gets to the mind of that undecided voter looking at that.
But that's the field right now. Even if Bernie wins, we got somebody else who's undisciplined and says the wrong thing. So if
you are just on it. I mean, I'm just talking about Joe Biden. I mean, of course,
you compared the two people, and I'm trying to compare the three. The alternative to Joe doesn't change that situation.
Well, we know Bernie's going to say whatever Bernie's going to say.
He's going to praise Castro before Florida votes. That should tell you what kind of candidate he is.
I like this. Sister Sally. Sister Sally's going to. I mean, what are your thoughts about that, Kris?
That was actually my thoughts. Today, I was looking at Twitter before I came on, and I think some of the Bernie surrogates were trying to raise issues about Joe on gender and Joe on race, and everything I kept thinking about is every statement that you're bringing against Joe, applies equally, if not worse, to Bernie.
He said about abortion in 1983.
Right.
And I was like, do you really think this is something that black voters are going to care or women are going to care about?
Or that the fact where you have Bernie in his file on abortion, on gender politics, on things like that. We're in the mainstream right now, we have one 75-year-old man, another 78-year-old man, and another 76-year-old man.
We got three 70-year-old white men running for president.
So
that's what we have.
It's baked in that they're going to have problematic issues in their history. If we didn't want this issue, we would have nominated one of the 25 other people that ran for president. It's not like we lacked a number of choices. So I think voters have come to say, okay, we understand who we have in these people. We're looking at other things. Not that those things aren't important, but we're looking at other things.
And there could be, any one of these gaffes could be a fatal gaffe in a way that, not just kind of bumping around on the margins. But back to Trump. I mean, Trump didn't have this history we could go and pull his votes from in 1987 or clips from a hearing where he, wasn't at his best. And now we do have those receipts. So he had an advantage where nobody really knew how he was going to perform in these situations.
But everyone knew President Trump before. I mean, he was.
They knew
theoretical though. And,
they knew the television star. They didn't know the New Yorkers that we knew.
But they knew the New York. They
didn't. Look how Bloomberg went down once you knew him from a different point of view. Bloomberg, the philanthropist, was very ready about to clean up on Super Tuesday. Then New Yorkers were like, wait a minute. Then New York, the mayor, Bloomberg, the mayor, came into the race, and then he went below the favorability threshold. So bringing Trump as who he was in New York and who he is as president, it was a little different of a game.
Well, I tell you what, now that Biden is the front runner, now that Biden is all eyes on Biden, because when all eyes were on Biden early on, when he was the front runner going in Ohio, and they boom, 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 boom. I remember was watching, and loved Biden. Everyone loved Biden. Biden couldn't stop Biden. One gaffle, and everyone hated Biden. It was no more Biden. He went down the toilet somewhere, and everyone else rose, and then next thing you know, come Biden could come home to Joe. So I'm just, are we going, which one we're getting, right? When that fire and that pressure is on you, we've seen everyone.
Yeah, it's a CAT scan for the soul, as it's described as.
And now that spotlight is back on the former vice president to perform, and we will see how he would do. And
now he has to be disciplined in a way he hasn't been. He has to get money to the campaign as before he didn't have. He has to now run because everything is on the line.
Everything's on the line. I mean, when Bernie was the front runner, oh my goodness, the lights got on Bernie real quick, and next thing you know, people start picking up phones, people start calling, people, and Bernie was gone, right?
I mean, you're gonna get a tweet. You're gonna get several tweets for saying he's gone.
No. What I'm saying is that when Biden had the pressure on him, he didn't do well under pressure. Iowa slipped away. New Hampshire slipped away. I mean, and then as soon as Mayor Pete had the pressure on him, you know, his stuff slipped away. Then we came down, and Joe's back up, and then Joe's now, you know, Bernie had the lights on him because he was like supposed to do very well and on Super Tuesday, and he's supposed to try to figure out how to lock this thing up. The pressure was on him. Next thing you know, Biden he's down. I mean, so, you know.
That's the calendar, though. And
it is the calendar.
I was in Iowa for Biden, and he was basically running it. I mean, they had a really good staff there and an infrastructure, but it was all people like me, volunteers who flew out there and knew what we were doing and ran caucuses. He wasn't trying to win. He was just trying to kind of, those weren't states where he was going to do well no matter how much he had invested. And I think it was very smart of him not to. I mean, it was a bad kind of media narrative for a couple of weeks, but it was very smart of him not to like spend money on something that wasn't going to.
Isn't Biden?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I don't think you even look at that and be like, oh, he messed up in those states or did poorly when he he didn't make a lot of effort. I don't really consider those
but you were
huge
there.
losses.
Right. If I'm sitting at home and I'm just getting on the bus and going to work every day, and I turn on one of these channels. I'm just telling you what the average.
Right, and I understand that, and it's a difficult thing. We all just kind of had to wait it out until we got to South Carolina.
Right.
Some tough, tough weeks for all of us.
But for the DNC now, Iowa may be rechanged.
Oh, yeah, I think that. I think this is the last Iowa caucus, but
that leads.
Will be the way. Yes, exactly. So, and I feel bad for the people of Iowa, but. It was a good run.
Why? Is it because it didn't come out the way people wanted it to?
Well, no, it's just not a very good system at all. You could do a whole show on this, actually.
Yeah, the whole show. In fact,
just for folks in Iowa, I know they might be like.
Previous campaigns have said the same thing. Yeah. It's like putting millions of dollars on a front porch and setting it on fire.
Yeah, I don't understand that Iowa is the highest concentration of college graduates of any state in the country. I don't think people understand that. And they also kind of are professional caucusers, if that makes sense. They've been doing this for so long. But again, that's another show.
Obama knew that very well, and they figured it out very well.
Obama started 3 years early with the living room. This living room, come over and let's talk about Barack Obama. I mean, it was a beautiful thing.
President Obama saved Iowa because before that, people were even thinking in 2008, 2004. Remember,
that's right.
We wanted to move Iowa off the map, because Iowa gave President Obama his start, I think it gave them a reprieve. But it's very.
It's over now.
Iowa changed the world.
But it just changed the world by what just happened in the Democratic primary. I think it's I think Iowa's over.
Right.
God bless Iowa. We love you guys, but I think that's going to be over. We're going to end on this note. We got the delegate count coming.
Yes.
We have states that are coming up. Right? We always like predictions here at Always Real Talk. Yeah. What do you have in Michigan?
I didn't come prepared with numbers, but
just give me your heart. Give me your heart. You know, give me that gut. Give me that Sally gut.
I think Biden's going to blow it out. I think Bernie's going to
double digits.
Yeah. I don't think
Bernie's
going to do nearly as well as he did
last
time.
What do you have?
I think Biden's going to win it, but I'm thinking it's close just because of Michigan is close to where he's been setting up with, and he has some sort of a team there.
Yeah, I think he's going to blow it out by double digits. I think it's going to be double digits. I think it's going to be 15, 20 points, and he's going to beat Bernie Sanders in Michigan. I think it's, people in Michigan have not forgot the bailout. They have not forgot, a number of things that the Obama administration went up there and did and helped out Michigan. It's going to have he's going to have a hard, people don't want to lose their jobs. People don't want to get rid of big corporations that are actually paying them money, and they should be paying more. But the unions are not going to get behind Bernie and this health care plan that he has because they're scared of it. He wins by 20, 25 points. What's the next state? What's the next state? Next state.
Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Oh my God, it's a blowout.
I think Biden, I think Bernie underperformed in Mississippi of all the minority states. I think he did worse in Mississippi. I think a lot of it had to do with the Mississippi burning hashtag, which they still think is quite clever. But I think there's also this idea that they can like pick off black people from the community by like bringing up Anita Hill or something like that. Again, and it goes back to this is all baked into who is, we know Joe. So I think Mississippi is not going to go well for Bernie Sanders. What else is coming up?
Mississippi, you got Mississippi. What you think about Mississippi?
I think I wouldn't be surprised if he got closed out.
So you're looking at 30 points?
Yes.
30 points. What do you think?
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Okay. He blamed Obama.
Is Mississippi open primary?
I'd have to look.
I think last year.
They might make a difference.
They absolutely make a difference.
I think that might make a
Carolina,
difference.
It didn't make as much of a difference as I was terrified of the crossovers in South Carolina, and it didn't. I mean, it definitely was significant. I've done see these exit polls, and apparently there was a big deal. Somebody told me there was a big deal in one of the Super Tuesday states. She was like, I was a poll worker, and I counted probably 20 people who told me they were Republicans.
In Texas too, I think in Texas it was open, and I think you have folks in Texas say, hey, they went there, and then it was open primary in Bernie's home state. Right, that was open primary, and people went in and vote for Joe Biden, Republicans, because they didn't like Bernie Sanders.
They argued when they uniquely commissioned that they should all be open states. So that would be interesting if he got.
This is why.
Fell.
This is 100% why.
That's
so that Republicans could cross over. I mean, he benefits from this, or Republicans benefit from this. If you think this wasn't part of it, the demanding open primaries. And they even knew, I tweeted one of the union commissioners, I said, don't you understand that they don't have an incumbent? And because they sent people over to vote in our Indiana primary and the West Virginia primary because Trump already had it. And the exit polls show that it was more than the margin. And I pointed this out to one of the unity commissioners.
Over 43%.
And she said, yeah, people have mentioned that, but we don't think that's a problem. And I have it on Twitter. I have a screenshot of her saying that. So like they knew going in that this was.
They thought it'd benefit them, and so they wanted to put everything in the rules.
People into the party. It's about bringing people in to vote for Bernie to mess things up.
Well, let's get back to the point. The point is what? Democratic primary. Former vice president saying it should be a Democrat, that you should elect a real Democrat.
Right.
He's a real Democrat in the party.
So here's the $1 million question, and I keep asking.
Did you say $1 million question?
Yes, I keep.
A lot of money.
That's a lot of money because
it's a little something.
You go a little higher.
A little something.
What do Bernie Sanders supporters, I'm sorry to call them, expect from Democrats if they make them the enemy? And here in the polls have showed Bernie is losing by 20%, by 30%, and sometimes even 50% of people who consider themselves a loyal Democrat. So how are you working against the party and trying to be head of it?
Well, and it's not going to work. And I think that he tried to do this before, and it was kind of there was so much going on that was kind of less of people like, oh, well, quit leaving him out just as an independent. Like it kind of worked for him. And when we try to be like, hey, you're not a Democrat, like I even wrote an article. I was like, stop saying that. That's not the point. He's not a Democrat because he doesn't share our values. Is what we should be saying. But now, like as you said, I'll give you an example. So in Iowa, in the Iowa caucuses, you're in a small room of people. And everybody goes and stands in their corner by their candidate. And if you don't get viability, then you go and stand in another corner with someone who was. So the Bernie people were clapping and cheering when people weren't viable, and then couldn't figure out why they wouldn't come caucus with them. So my point is, you can't they're making fun of the Buttigieg people. Like these people are not going to come to you if you're insulting their first choice, or if you're making them, or if you're saying, I mean, they're 30% of the party maybe are supporting Bernie Sanders, and he's telling everybody else, we don't need you, we don't want you, we're taking over your party. So why would anybody support him? Why would anyone want him to?
Well, hold that thought. We'll be right back. All right, we're back with my good friends Sally Albright and Kris Randolph, and we're here, two phenomenal, strong women that understand the democratic politics, but more importantly, national politics. So, we're going back to this. The virus that's now, coronavirus that's going on, right? Will this affect the election if it continues to move in a direction? We just got a tweet. I mean, not a tweet, but I just got a text from my godson who works for Pinterest, and he said that they're now closed down indefinitely. Everyone's working from home.
There's two possible. It's already started to affect the campaigns. Rachel Maddow on television last night was asking Senator Sanders about his pandemic response, and he kept trying to pivot to the inequities and healthcare, and it didn't really resonate because this is a different kind of healthcare issue. This is a pandemic response. This is either going to be his Katrina moment or the moment of where Giuliani was able to capitalize, the 9/11 moment. There's only two possible moments that a president and a presidential candidate can have. So is the president going to rise to the moment, and will Joe Biden be seen as an alternative, or vice versa?
Now, Sally, that's a good point, because the point comes down to he's still the president of the United States, right? So he has the ability to throw all resources. He has the ability to use the entire United States government to try to tackle this problem.
Bare minimum. That's the United States resources. That's not Donald Trump's resources. That's the bare minimum any president's going to be able to do. What I'm going to say is this: you just got the text about Pinterest, so we're just starting to hear about closing schools in the West Coast. I think even a week from now, we're going to be having a completely different conversation about the coronavirus.
I agree.
And a month from now, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, this could just be, it could pass out. We could say, oh, wow, that worked out okay. But right now, nobody knows what's going to happen. We're not getting good information from the president. We're all getting our information from other sources because we can't. I think everybody knows you can't trust the president because he's not even trying to pretend he's operating like with facts out there. When he disputes the World Health Organization's numbers, and you can see the numbers right there. So my point is, I don't think that there's any way to know how this is going to go. But just being like, oh, he has the resources of the government to fight this. Well, any president would have that. So it takes more.
Yeah, but I have to say this though, and because I know you guys are such huge Democrats. I mean, you guys just
you could look at 1980 and 1992.
No, let's look at a crisis took place in New York. When the towers came down, there was a response. The response happened to be the correct response. That correct response lifted the mayor of New York at that time
very much
right. So this president has the ability, whatever mistakes took place for the last week, to correct that and to stand up to this virus and attack it in such a way that it could be a Giuliani moment.
It can be.
I mean,
it can be.
Now, you can pull that off. More power to him.
Now the question is that people may not believe that he has it in him to do that, but he could do that.
I just don't know that he wants to.
If he does that, is it over for the Democrats?
It's never over. There's 2 times we've
is
taken
it over?
out.
How do you come back from that?
We've taken out a sitting president in 1992 and 1980, and one of those reasons was a perceived lack of good handling of a crisis, which was the Iran-Contra in 1980.
But they didn't handle it properly.
Right.
I mean, it didn't handle it. I mean, I don't think Democratic Party's ever taken someone out that actually handled it.
What if he knocks us out of the park?
What if he knocks it out of the park? Is it over?
Then, I mean, we'd have to. I mean, if he does, then we will have a conversation about that. I just don't see it.
You don't believe it.
No,
you just don't believe it.
I don't think he has the. I mean, I don't want to say nice things about Rudy Giuliani, but he was a good politician. Like, he handled it. Like, he knew what he was doing. Like, he did. Like, people who don't remember 9/11 are going to be horrified that I say this, but Julia did a good job. George Bush did a good job. They had the political skills. They had the people. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it. I don't think Trump can do any of that.
Okay. So as we end, because we will soon. Well, the good thing
that's going to be my quote. Sally Albright loves Giuliani.
but let me also say this, which I think is important.
But some things transcend party and politics.
This transcends political. I want everyone to be safe. I want this administration to do the right thing. I want them to step up to the table. I want them to make sure that every American is safe, that we use all the resources necessary to keep, and everyone says that until there's someone in their family that's over there dealing with it, right? That's how this kind of works, right? And so I hope he does, right?
And I'm rooting for the economy. I'm rooting for him to do well because the impact, if something happens, is not something you want. And people say, well, we need a worse economy for Democrats. No, I'm not rooting against the economy. No. We're Americans first, and we want these people to rise to the occasion.
Well, with that being said, look, we're out of time, but look, Sally, I want to thank you for coming by. We'll definitely have you back on 2020. This has been awesome. Kris, it's always good to see you. Get your insights. We're actually doing a Always Real Talk public health sector section that we actually started to work on that we're doing. Maternal health is going to be a big issue. There are a lot of women that are having, that's a big issue that's taking place. We'll be talking about that, the coronavirus. We'll be talking about that. It's good to have you both on. Hey, it's Always Real Talk, so it's going to be real.